3 signs you have a good boss in the workplace. Number 1, good communication skills. Number 2, compassion and empathy merged into one, where they actually care and understand. Number 3, leadership skills. They are always there to lead from the front.
I think these are all good points. I think communication is crucial. I think a lot of times as a company gets bigger, it gets harder and you get input from the HR department. Now, you can't say this, you can't talk about that, you don't want to say things this way. And I think, although I understand it from a legal liability standpoint, I think a lot of times that stuff gets in the way of being able to just have an honest conversation with people. Hey, this thing happened, here's what we did about it, here's what you might have heard, here's the truth, and here's how we're gonna not let that happen in the future. And I think that is really critical, to be honest and upfront with people who work for you, to communicate what's really going on and give them as many details as possible is really important. And not just, yes, about, this change is coming or a new policy, new procedure or whatever. Do you need training? Great, let's do training. Do you have questions? Great, let's answer questions. And then once you've done that, then yes, you can start to hold people accountable for doing the new thing or whatever it is. But if you don't communicate it and then it doesn't go the way you want, you only have yourself to blame. So absolutely good communication is super important. And compassion and empathy, right? We're people working with people. At the end of the day, there's metrics and goals and sales targets and production levels that you want to reach and whatever, but none of it happens if you don't have the people invested in doing a good job. And that only happens if they feel good about where they work and they care about doing a good job. And that comes from giving them an incentive to care and treating them like people and making sure that you're taking care of them and attuned to their interests and their needs and what may be going on inside and outside of work. And that all sounds a little touchy-feely and sort of frou-frou, but the reality is if you're a jerk to your employees, you can expect them to be jerks back, and it's going to hurt you a lot more than you're going to hurt them. Whereas if you're kind and caring and compassionate and treat them like the people that they are, you're going to see that rewarded, 10 times over, and not just by the business doing better, but you feel better as a person, I think, treating other people well. And if you don't, you should probably talk to somebody about it. So the third part of it is leadership. And that, again, is not asking people to do things you're not willing or comfortable doing, not setting expectations for people to do things that you're not going to do. For example, you can't say, well, you guys have to work Saturday, you have to work overtime, you have to put in long days to get this project done, but I'm going home at 5 and I'm gonna not work the weekend, but you guys have to do it. That's a great way to build immediate resentment and dissatisfaction, right? If you're gonna ask people to do extra, go above and beyond, then you as the leader, the owner, the manager, you better be willing to do that as well. Go above and beyond and put in the extra effort. If they're struggling, you should be saying, how can I help? Right? How can I lighten your load or give you more support or get you somebody to help out with this project or whatever? You don't want to lead from the back. There's an expression, I think, in the military, leaders eat last, right? You want to make sure your crew, the troops, the employees, however you want to classify them, right? They're taken care of first. They get fed, they get sheltered, they get whatever help they need. And then the leadership, they eat last. They eat after everyone else has gotten taken care of. Right? You don't run to the front of the line, you don't take the lion's share, you don't help yourself out and leave everyone else to fight for scraps if you're expecting people to want to follow you, to help you, to work with you, to help you together achieve something, right? That's good leadership. So these are all excellent points. If you're working for somebody who's doing these kinds of things, then you're probably happy at your work environment and you're making a positive contribution. If your boss is a bad boss and doing poor things, poorly communicating, poor leadership, no compassion, then that's probably a place where you want to start looking for a way out.
This is a solution for anyone in full-time employment that has a boss that can't control his emotions. For example, if you have a boss that shouts, this is exactly what you do. You go, are you all right? And then you don't say anything, you just look at them. Because it's actually not acceptable to throw stuff because you're on a higher pay packet. So all you do is you just go, are you all right? And then you go silent and you just make eye contact and you make them feel uneasy, and that is the answer. You don't say anything else. From there, you just remove yourself from the situation and they're going to think that's a little bit over the top.
A little bit over the top, yes. If you're yelling and throwing things, I would say that's a lot over the top. If you're boss or manager, that is not the way to behave. If you want to have the respect and, loyalty and motivation from the staff, yelling and throwing things and acting like an idiot is definitely not the way to get that to happen. You may instill fear in the moment, and you may get them to say yes to whatever you're asking in the moment, but as soon as your back is turned, you're going to find that you are not getting the results that you want. And if you continue down that path, you're going to find that you have very high turnover because people are going to leave for better jobs. Even if there's less pay, they'd rather work for less pay than to have to deal with a psychopath at work. So yes, the obvious lesson here is if you're managing people, keep your emotions in check and communicate like an adult.
Why do bad managers stay? Well, I think there's a couple of reasons. One is usually bad managers still are getting results on some level, and results are the language of the business. So they may be a horrible manager, but they're still getting results. The other reason is people don't dare report them to HR because there's a power dynamic. And HR usually isn't going to fire a manager on one complaint. It has to be a pattern of multiple complaints over time. And then finally something gets done. But it is a frustrating thing for sure.
Okay, so the question is, why do bad managers stay? Why don't they get replaced with better managers? I would say it's because there's a huge shortage of good managers. And a lot of times companies are doing the best they can with the people they've been able to get. And would any company love to have all good managers who have inspired, motivated staff under them with great ability to manage people and get top-notch results? Of course. But bad managers happen because sometimes there's no one to take their place, because there's no one to show them how to be a better manager. They're managing the way they were taught and the way the company culture allows them to continue to manage, or sometimes that's just the best they can do. So there's a lot of reasons for bad managers. If you're the company owner, you want to root that out and fix it as quickly as you can, because nothing will sink a company faster than bad middle management, but it's a lot harder said than done. And there's a million reasons bad managers are still around. She named two, but that's definitely not the whole story.
3 steps for holding people accountable. Yeah, so the first step is you got to be very clear on what you want. I expect you to send me a report every Friday. And the first Friday, you don't send it to me. I see you on Monday and say, hey, Logan, where's that report? He goes, oh yeah, I forgot about it. And I go to you and say, Logan, listen, I may not have been clear why that's important to me, but I use those reports to really understand what's going on in the business. You and your team play a really critical role. What I'm really doing is I'm making the prompt. That was my fault, not making clear to you what the importance was for why I'm asking you to do this. And I say, now are you clear, Logan? Does everything make sense? And you go, yes, I got it. Now, the next time you forget to send me that report, now I can hold you accountable. So you can't hold someone accountable if you don't do steps 1 and steps 2.
Okay, so I would say good points here. The hardest part of running a business of any size, I think, is managing the people. The rest of it you can control and sort of bend to your will and make it work the way you want to work, but people are all independent individuals with their own agency and their own ideas and their own way of doing things and their own way of hearing what you've told them, and managing them effectively and managing to the individual's preferences and style of communication and motivation is all super challenging. So his points here about how to hold people accountable are valid. One, in order to hold somebody accountable, first you have to be super clear about what you want. If you say something really vague like, hey, go do a good job, well, they're free to interpret that any way they want, and you can't really get mad if the way they do a good job is totally different than what you were hoping for if you didn't give them any explicit instruction. And then if there are corrections, you owe it to them first to let them know, hey, when I asked you to do this, what I really wanted was this, this, and this. I want it, exactly this way. I want it formatted this way or whatever. The more specific correction you can give, the more chance they're going to be able to do it the way you're looking for. If you don't give any feedback, then again, that's really on your plate as the manager. That's your fault for not giving specific feedback. If you've made your expectations clear and then you've given specific feedback on where things aren't still meeting standards, then at that point, yes, you can say, hey, why is this still not happening the way I was expecting? But a lot of people jump right to yelling at employees and saying, you screwed this up, you did this wrong, you didn't, do what I wanted, without ever setting clear expectations or ever giving any feedback or course correction as they're going along. And then people get resentful and it's not fair, and they're upset and tend to go look for another job if that happens too many times with the managers they have. So if you want to prevent turnover and get much better results, you've got to follow the steps. You've got to be clear with what you want. You've got to give good feedback. And then after you've done those things, then you have a right to expect the results that you were hoping for.